This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Have to address issues like uncontrolled mass immigration and division of our communities. And what I'm looking for is a long-term solution, not just a short-term.
I don't know what any of that has got to do with Southport.
Don't you?
I don't know, because the man charged was born in Cardiff.
Do you know what? You want to get out more. You want to get out more. You want to get out more.
Get out, you lazy lout. Get into your working clothes. Up to your knees in oil and grease with a grindstone to your nose. Get up, get out, you lazy lout. Get into your working clothes. Up to
Quiet Riot. This is the Quiet Riot podcast. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for dropping by. And if you're a returning customer, welcome back. I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Andreou. While we may have riot in our name, quiet is our game, and it goes without saying that we utterly condemn actual riot.
Producer Kenny is on his hulls in Bonnie, Scotland. So Alex and I have free reign this week, and we've brought in a very special friend to help us guide you through the news, and more on that in a moment.
But for now, grab a cold drink, spray the factor 30, stretch out on your lounge, and let us start this quiet riot.
Quiet Riot.
Naomi and I put out a Sunday school episode a few days ago that focused on the racist violence that erupted over the weekend. Do have a listen to that if you're not already hoovered it up. But sadly, there has been more violence and thuggery since, so with grim inevitability, we return to that topic.
And Vice President Harris has announced her running mate, former US National Guard, former geography teacher, and current Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. We'll be discussing what we make of this appointment, and we'll bring you the latest from the USA polls. Plus, 2 regular features are back. We salute the hate mail in You Gotta Troll With It, and storming back into the Quiet Riot charts, it's everyone's favourite segment, Wokey Dokie.
But first, we are thrilled to be joined this week by the most shared voice on British radio, the best-selling author and king of the monologue. It's our friend James O'Brien. Kalimera Mitso. Polly. James, I'm reading from a pretty balanced review of your book, How They Broke Britain, from Spiked, which begins, British radio presenter James O'Brien is not easy to warm to.
What?
This is mainly due to his personality.
This is appalling. I thought I was coming for a nice easy afternoon.
Not content with smearing those he disagrees with as racists, xenophobes and proto-fascists on his weekday LBC show, O'Brien has now decided to develop his shtick in a 4th book, How They Broke Britain, a liberal elite conspiracy theory stretched over 350 pages of pompous, smug prose. James, I just checked the charts, and your smug, pompous prose is still top 20, almost a year after being published. Why are the British public so bad at books?
can't complain. There's a cottage industry of I don't even know if I'd seen that one. There's a cottage industry of people who normally start their articles by saying, I accidentally heard some of James O'Brien in the back of a taxi. And then there's 2,000 words of critique of everything I've ever done in my life. There's a sort of level of obsession that is obviously flattering, but also, not to jump the gun on Tim Walz, it's also a bit weird. Happy days.
Right.
We'll crack on with the show. Quiet Riot. Without our timekeeper-in-chief, Kenny, we're going to have to fire our own starting pistol on the bastardised version of Just a Minute. So, Alex, get your tongue untied. I'm going to start the clock on the week in 60 seconds in 3, 2, 1, go.
Far-right riots in Britain intensified with more expected on Wednesday night. Ordinary people who are definitely not racist expressed their support for local communities by burning down a public library and a citizen advice bureau.
The rioters voiced their legitimate concerns by looting Greggs where no vegan sausage rolls were taken, Shoe Zone and Lush. A judge handing down sentences remarked, a bath bomb is still a bomb.
In the States, Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz as the presidential running mate, as if we didn't have enough to contend with after the whole Kamala fiasco. We now have to deal with Tim Walz, Tim Walz and Tim Wales.
In Wales, Eluned Morgan was confirmed as First Minister, though depending on who you listen to, it might be Eluned Morgan, Eluned Morgan or Eluned Morgan.
In Scotland, Royal Mail said sorry for delivering exam results to Orkney early, admitting it's definitely not the sort of service their customers expect.
In Northern Ireland, swimmers and dog owners have been told to avoid Loch Ness because of an outbreak of a blue-green algae. Presumably the orange algae is still off marching somewhere.
Another week of non-stop Olympic drama included a men's 100-metre sprint declared the fastest race in history.
And the owner of the world's most famous pole, Olympic vaulter Anthony Ammirati, has been offered a $250,000 pawn deal after his sausage cost him a Paris medal. He really is living his Bratwurst summer.
And Robert Kennedy Jr.'s presidential bid has sunk amid headlines about sexual harassment, brainworms and dumping a dead bear cub in New York Central Park. It seems he's just too normal for those Trump supporters. Stop the clock. 58 seconds.
1 minute.
No.
Play it on double speed, everyone.
No, he's not
Smashed
here.
it.
No, Kenny's not here. Every week it's going to be 58 seconds.
Okay.
Until he's back.
58 seconds.
Amazing, well done.
Quiet. Riot.
Now, after the riots come the excuses. It turns out it was nobody's fault. The Daily Mail bemoaned Tinderbox Britain when the kindling is in fact rolled up Daily Mail front pages. Tory politicians say they condemn all violence, having spent years accusing lefty lawyers and calling asylum seekers a swarm and an invasion. Farage says he was innocently misled by Andrew Tate.
What?
The far-right mob that started the rumours says they were misled by a Russian website. I mean, who knew that Andrew Tate and Russian websites were not entirely reliable sources? And Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson, from his 5-star Ayia Napa resort, says the public are being misled by politicians like the Tories and Farage, who are trying to pin the whole thing on him, when he never once incited anyone. Well, this is him on the very first evening last week, while things were beginning to bubble up in Southport.
So before people get on quick and condemn the angry men, that anger is justified. OK? I'm surprised this took this long. And with your two-tier cowardice policing, you've actually encouraged the scenes you see tonight. You've done this. The government have done this. The police have done this. Your absolute cowardice has resulted in this. Children being butchered and murdered. Stop the fucking boats. Get them out of them hotels. Get them gone. Put them on boats and send them back. OK? They shouldn't be here. They're endangering the safety of our families. Men will rise up. We're always going to rise up. They have to rise up to defend their families. You've brought this war on our shores.
Sounds cheerful.
Yeah, so James, it turns out all this was an innocent mistake.
I hadn't heard that.
What do you make of that?
I hadn't heard that before. I'm familiar with the reverse ferrets of Farage, but Robinson is sort of not someone I'm as au fait with, but that's extraordinary. And to actually single out hotels as being suitable targets for attack or for war.
And that was on the first night before.
Yeah, before they'd actually set fire to hotels in, I think, Rotherham and Tamworth.
Was he already in Ayia Napa when he did that, or is that in the UK before he fled?
No, I think he was. I think it was the day before, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'd worry a bit that all of us have fallen into it's not so much a trap, but the idea that if it turned out the murderer had been an asylum seeker or had come over on the boat or was a Muslim, then we've all sort of contributed to the idea that, well, that might have been never
okay then.
Yeah, not okay then. But of course, when it emerged that he was none of the things that these people are obsessed with, except of course black, there's been absolutely no attempt to dial down the I mean, it's an epic misfire, but it's not misfires usually are. Yeah, it wouldn't
have been all right.
Because no one's really addressing the idea that, if it does happen, and of course it might, then this level of response would be normal and natural and forgivable. But that's an extraordinary little clip that you played me there.
Isn't it?
I mean, just for the detail of the targeting and the specifics.
And I guess your point is further enforced by the fact that after it emerged that he wasn't a migrant and he wasn't a Muslim, they still targeted mosques. Yeah. They still continued to riot. So,
and they're now going for the immigration centres and the immigration lawyers and
the police.
The YouGov poll this week about what do they think? What words do they apply to the people taking part in the riots? Heartwarmingly, 67% of Brits say they're thugs, 65% rioters, 58% racist or far right, terrorists. Even a quarter of people would claim them to be. 16% say people with legitimate concerns. And I think that number is quite interesting because it's approximately Reform UK vote share nationally.
And UKIP's.
Yeah, indeed. That, to me, is quite fascinating in terms of where we can begin to apportion blame beyond just Tommy Robinson, but political leaders who are now part of the more mainstream fabric of British democracy, like Farage sitting in the House of Commons. Their language, their words, and we talked about this on our Sunday school programme a couple of days ago, that the chants were stop the votes. It was Conservative minister, Prime Minister language being repeated back by racists and thugs and violent hooligans. And
there was another YouGov poll that looked at support for the riots, and it turns out, actually, if you look overall, only about 4% of people support them. That doesn't seem like a silent majority, does it?
No. I think that's why they're panicking, isn't it?
But if you then break it down by party, they've got 21% in Reform support the riots, 25% have sympathy with the views of the rioters, 33% think the riots are justified. And I mean, that is significantly higher than the average. And all of the other parties, even the Conservatives, are only about 8 or 9% in their sort of support or think they're justified. Labour, Lib Dems are between 1 and 4%.
Right.
And so there is something there, right?
Well, I go even more. I can tell you that Dylan Carey, who pleaded guilty to violent disorder yesterday at Liverpool Crown Court, was out canvassing for reform in April.
Right.
So, this could all be epic coincidences. Who knows? But it seems unlikely, doesn't it? And speaking of coincidences, 21% was it of reform voters
support the riots.
Because oddly enough, 20% of Reform MPs have served time in British jails for attacking a British woman. So these numbers are almost sort of...
I'd like to ask you both about language. You're both brilliant linguists. And language really matters, doesn't it? And I called it a pogrom as soon as they were trying to torch a hotel. I was like, it is a pogrom, and we have to use that language. We have to say when it is neo-Nazism and fascism. And I've been a bit disappointed by the political classes veering away and feeling afraid to use some of that language. What do you guys make of it all, and what language would we expect them to be using?
I mean, they've gone further than they have ever before.
They've had to.
And what's been actually quite gratifying, I guess, is to see all the newspapers going with far right on their front pages. On Sunday, it was really quite notable that not even the most right-wing ones shied away from calling them far-right thugs or whatever. I'm a little bit disappointed with BBC and Sky's anti-immigration protests.
It's not a riot, it's a protest, yeah.
A, because it's not a protest, it's violent crime. And B, because, they're not going after Canadian immigrants, are they? They're not. No one is complaining about Ukrainian people who came over here in large numbers a couple of years ago. At the moment.
Well, and there was an attack on a car that contained Eastern Europeans, and you can hear some of the attackers shouting, "Foreigners, get them!" So that as you're alluding to, really, Alex, that line is always perilously thin. I heard I think it was Emma Barnett on the Today programme, used the word very, very coolly, completely accurately, just said Islamophobic, which, of course, previously there's been debate about whether that word exists or what should exist or what it applies to. So, encouraged by that, you turn on Good Morning Britain and you see Ed Balls essentially trying to tell Zara Sultana that it's ridiculous to bring Islamophobia into protests, into crimes that include attacks on a mosque. Could you imagine somebody suggesting that an attack on a synagogue wasn't anti-Semitic?
No.
It's
Can you imagine Ed Bull saying that?
Yes, no, and so I don't fully grasp where that impulse comes from to push back against that kind of comment. And I use the word pogrom. I've used it on LBC, and I don't think there's a better word to use, because you are literally trying to exterminate people based entirely upon their origin, entirely upon their ethnicity. And it doesn't have to involve trying to kill, of course, a pogrom. Technically, you could just simply be trying to drive them out of where they are living. And that, at the moment, is a hotel in Rotherham and a holiday inn in Tamworth.
Did, incidentally.
Yes.
Apparently, loads of refugees were sleeping in the fields.
And a Labour MP had done it as well. I think Kate someone, the MP for Tamworth, had
Doxed them in the House of Commons.
Had previously said,
Holiday
my
Inn.
constituents want their Holiday Inn back, which, raises the prospect of who in Tamworth is feeling aggrieved at not being able to check into the Holiday Inn Express in Tamworth at the moment, because it'd be a slightly odd way to behave, but also what she thought would happen. So, a slightly more measured middle-class version of what Robinson was doing in that clip that you played. Essentially
I don't agree
saying,
with that.
do you not? The hotel's a fair game?
No, no, it's not that. She's there to represent her constituents, and if she's getting a large volume of complaints about a particular hotel for whatever reason, I think she has to reflect that in the House of Commons.
She didn't have to name it, did she?
Maybe she should have been more circumspect.
And also, she's buying into the idea, however many complaints from her constituents she's getting, that these people shouldn't be there.
And they can't claim ignorance.
No.
MPs have been getting this from pro-refugee charities and people like the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants. They send them briefings and say, whatever you do not mention the exact name or location of accommodation. It's highly dangerous. Don't do it.
Badly done, for sure. All I'm saying is there is a different context there. This was said at a time when the central accusation from Labour to the then Tory government was that they just were warehousing asylum seekers instead of processing their claims and causing loads of problems in those communities, because it was exactly dividing them in that particular way. So absolutely badly done, but I think the context matters.
I looked up in my borough of Hounslow, I was interested in trying to Google where they were, where the hotels were, just out of curiosity, and I stumbled across a report they did in November into what the conditions inside what we call hotels, which is kind of euphemistic most of the time, were actually like. And they were, of course, grim. And there are many recorded cases of people getting ill, malnutrition, having to exist entirely on food that's being microwaved. And I think it's deliberately cultivated by people like Farage. But even people who would consider themselves reasonable and relatively compassionate have fallen for the idea that they're enjoying Claridge's level of hospitality in these places, that they are having the same experience that you and I would have if we checked in tomorrow, James, paying the full tariff.
I have the misfortune of living in close proximity to the Tice Oakshott household.
Oof.
And it's B&B land.
Right.
It's Pimlico.
Yes.
There are a lot of them. And that monster gets his phone out or has a crew with him filming, and he goes up to people who are sleeping rough outside these B&Bs, and says, why are you sleeping on the street and not inside? And these people think that he is a journalist with good intentions. And I try and intervene sometimes, and I say, bad man, don't speak to him, bad man. But he'll be provoking them with, so what, you had an ensuite bathroom, did you? And a double bed, did
I've
you?
Seen some of this.
And you didn't like it? You didn't like that? And they like, no, terrible, too many people, one room, bed bugs or whatever.
Bugs,
and he clips out those bits and just has them going, no, didn't like having that bedroom.
What a charmer.
Yeah.
I think it would be quite poetic, since we know our jails are full at the moment, to stick a few of these people on the Bibi Stockholm. We know they think it's perfectly adequate, if not luxurious.
It's being retired, so get it while it's still going.
Well, get it while it's still going.
Quiet. Riot.
Is the timing a coincidence? I mean, my first reaction was no. My first reaction was suddenly we have a Labour government in and all this is kicking off.
I don't know. I think that it would be worse if the Tories were still in power, because So many of their most prominent members, some of whom are now running for the leadership of the party, have been obviously complicit in creating the ecosystem in which this could happen. You want to think about dehumanising, then Jenric's order to paint over the murals in the processing centre for unaccompanied children.
Grotesque.
Unaccompanied children. I don't even think you could describe it as a home comfort. The tiniest scintilla of welcome. A cartoon character painted on a wall. Robert Jenrick arrives and says, cover that up. So if they had been in charge, it would have been, I think, much, much uglier. But I don't know whether or not the sort of organic explosion curated by Robinson and Farage and the rest of them would have not happened without the Labour lead. I think that the kind of agitators online, the ones that are possibly in Russia or millions of miles away, or the ones that are always there, the people that Searchlight keep an eye on, the proper dinosaurs of the far right who are constantly hoping for opportunities like this, they probably feel aggrieved by the direction of political traffic on both sides of the Atlantic. They probably think that the election result, the scale of Keir Starmer's victory, although shallow, means that they're probably getting quite hopeful when Sunak and Braverman and the likes of them were coming out with stuff that 10 years ago or 20 years ago could have been on a National Front poster. Probably getting quite hopeful that things were moving in their direction, and then this election result has snatched that away from them. So that might have informed.
I think in general, actually, that was my diagnosis on Sunday, wasn't it?
Yep.
It's actually been a really bad year for them.
Yeah.
Because they had hopes that the EU election would go in a much bigger way their
that's true.
way. And, Le Pen ended up coming third in France.
Yeah. Trump was beginning to look unbeatable.
And exactly. Starmer big. Modi lost his...
Yeah, and the Rwanda thing, they were supposedly going to be getting people on planes
and now
Rwanda.
Trump looks like he's in trouble.
Yes.
So it does feel like it's a sort of spasm of, oh God, we were so close.
I think that's why Elon Musk's having another breakdown, isn't it?
Let's get on to that, James. So yesterday, Alex, you did a brilliant little mini cast without me on...
Well, it's not for me to say. Some have suggested it was brilliant.
But it was a look at the role of Musk and Twitter and whether or not the UK government should just close it down.
Well, try to regulate it properly, and if fruitless, then say, if you can't play by the laws and rules of this country, you can't operate in this territory. And my conclusion was that we wouldn't have put up with
a bank
Wehrmacht FM during the war, and the Americans have passed legislation that will ban TikTok unless it's sold. We just passed legislation that the Telegraph and the Spectator couldn't be bought by, foreign money, basically. So I don't understand why we're then hesitant when it comes to individuals that have a very obvious agenda.
And I've been thinking about that rhetorical question that you posed in that minicast, and please do all go and listen to it. And I've had some thoughts on it. And James, you may listen to me and then tell me I'm a wild conspiracy theorist that may dial into your radio show, but bear with me for a second. Let us think about UK telecoms infrastructure for a minute. All our telephone and broadband lines run on BT Openreach. You've got the old cable TV network, which has been repurposed to deliver Virgin Media, which was previously cable and wireless. And there are some new networks being brought in, like hyperoptic. Yeah. So these are all actually fairly easy to control or censor. The UK government could completely block access to Twitter because of these two major providers of all into our homes, right?
They call it
and lots of packets. And lots of sites are already censored in the UK and very hard to access, even with a VPN. So things like child pornography sites and things like that, quite rightly. The government can block that kind of content coming through those cables. So other than Openreach and Virgin Media, the only challenger entrant to the market is Starlink. And the number of Starlink customers in the UK doubled last year. And Starlink is a direct link from the satellite dish on the roof to the satellite in the sky. And that is owned by Elon Musk. And the government simply would not be able to block Twitter on that. Nobody could. You couldn't intercept that. Then let's think about the other companies in the Musk sphere of control, notably Tesla. Uber has just signed a deal with Chinese EV manufacturer BYD. And these two companies are now, Uber and BYD, are going to offer Uber drivers incentives to switch to electric cars, big discounts on maintenance, charging, financing and leasing, but effectively locking all those drivers into very long finance schemes with a Chinese company, which feels like a little bit Belt and Road by the back door. And if you don't know what Belt and Road is, listeners, it's China's gargantuan transcontinental network of infrastructure projects. You most commonly hear about it in Africa, but also in places like Hungary. And the opposition parties there have said they don't think Hungary will ever be able to repay China properly, putting them in a very difficult position, similar to lots of African countries, beholden to President Xi Jinping. So if the UK government is concerned about British companies being locked into these deals with Chinese manufacturers for geopolitical reasons, the only alternative, the obvious and pretty much only alternative, is Tesla, again, owned by Musk. So I guess in trying to think about that question that you posed, if they don't want to piss off Musk and they might decide that his Tesla EV and battery technology is less risky than becoming reliant on Chinese manufacturers, they may be cautious about how much they can fine, block, etc. Twitter, X.com, because he is an irrational actor. You might say, oh, he's a businessman, therefore he won't jeopardise one arm of his business for another. But he's a maniac, and he may well do.
I don't think that sounds like a conspiracy theory. It sounds like a theory.
Do I think that is the complicated plan that's at play here? I don't. Do I think that means that it's all win-win for Musk? Because if he edges them and they don't react, he looks like Johnny Big Balls. If he edges them and they react, then they have other kinds of problems. And also it will push loads of customers to Starlink, from what you were saying. Because
that's where I thought you were going, actually.
Because he will say, if you want to still get Twitter,
you need to sign up to
come
Starlink.
over to me.
Yeah.
It's Bond villain territory.
So,
I know that's a cliche, but it is sort of, I cannot have enough power. I cannot have enough influence.
It doesn't have to be the active plan that's going on. My own impression is that he's just a very, very damaged man who cannot resign himself to the fact he's got a trans child, and he's playing that temper tantrum in the most destructive way on the global stage.
Because before he bought it, Twitter was a place where trans rights were very much in the box seat, weren't they? Which is clearly not the case anymore. And that's why I said he's having another breakdown, because presumably he was hoping to influence elections. And Britain has gone, elections you mentioned in Europe have gone, and America looks likely possible to go against what he would prefer. I thought, oddly, I was struck by the Civil War tweets, and someone's dug into those and found that they actually go quite far back. He's been predicting civil war in the United Kingdom and in Europe for a very long time, which is, I think, a form of great replacement theory. It is. Of course, there's going to be civil war,
and
because
really
they're trying.
American concept.
Yeah, because they're going to try to do this, but. I don't know much about Starlink, except that it's been relevant to the war in Ukraine. Yeah. I tell you what struck me as very odd. I was looking at some of the coverage the other day, and I was thinking to myself, why on earth is Elon Musk suddenly interested in causing so much trouble for a Labour government and upping the interests of race rioters effectively and buying into this two-tier policing myth and all of this culture war hideousness? And then I saw a photograph of him and I thought, I recognise that bloke. And he turned up at Congress recently with Douglas Murray, of all people, Andrew Neil's little protege over at The Spectator, who's been writing.
I did not know that.
No,
That's bonkers.
And he, of course, has been writing about how life has to be made much harder for Muslims across Europe, regardless of whether they've ever done anything wrong for
all
decades.
Of that stuff, it goes into the same pot. And I think it's not a coincidence that he sort of, he was hinting support for Trump for a long time, but he went all out and endorsed him just after that assassination attempt. At which point he must have felt safe enough to do that. And now that it doesn't look as if it's completely a done deal, I think he's panicking. And the UK is it's what the psychiatrists call displacement activity. It's maybe I can do something over there.
Yeah, I like that.
And he was loved by Sunak.
Let me remind you, this is less than a year ago.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome. Elon, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We feel very privileged. We're excited to have you. Right. So I'm going to start with some.
So I think it's quite good. I mean, the general aspiration is with the X platform is to inform and entertain the public, and to be as accurate as possible and as truthful as possible, even if someone doesn't like the truth. You know, people don't always like the truth.
No.
Not always. But that's the aspiration, and I think if we stay true to the truth, then I think we'll find that people use the system to learn what is going on, and to learn. I think actually truth pays. So I think it'll be what I mean. Assuming you don't want to engage in self-delusion, then I think it's the smart move. You know, so.
Excellent, very helpful. Right, let's today. If you think next year you've got elections in, I think the US, India, I think Indonesia, probably here. There you go. Massive news. And actually, you've got just an enormous chunk of the world's population is voting next year, right? And you've got EU elections as well.
Yeah.
Actually, just these issues are right in front of us. Next year is when big elections across the globe, probably the first set of elections where this has been a real issue.
Yeah.
So figuring out how we manage that is, I think, kind of mission critical for the people who want the integrity of our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is quite entertaining, like the Pope in the puffer jacket. Have you seen that one?
I haven't.
That's amazing. But I mean, I still run into people who think that's real. I'm like, well, what are the odds he's wearing a puffer jacket in July in Rome? Be sweating. But it actually looked quite dashing, I have to say. In fact, I think AI fashion is going to be a real thing. So I don't mean doom and gloom. Like we live in the most interesting times, and I think this is it is 80% likely to be good and 20% bad. And I think if we're cognizant and careful about the bad part, on balance, actually, it will be the future that we want, or the future that is preferable.
So it's just breathtaking, isn't it?
And that was November 2023.
So many levels. I've recently had people doing fake clips from my show, which you can't get removed. You can't. So someone having me apparently saying things that I've never said.
So that's AI amazing. Voicing.
And the truth. He's talking about the truth. It's extraordinary.
Farage did an interview with Tom Swarbrick. It didn't go great, did it? He ended up saying it was all the fault of active Muslims. What's an active Muslim?
What's an inactive?
And also saying that he was misinformed by Andrew Tate's account. I mean, is that...
I found this... The thing with Farage is you've got that Steve Bannon, who's a good friend, of course, Steve Bannon, who he credited with playing a crucial role in Brexit. The prisoner, Steve Bannon, I suppose. That line about flooding the zone with shit comes back to me time and time again, because you try and get a handle on Farage's latest sort of rhetorical atrocity. And by the time you finish speaking, he's committed another one. So you lose track of it. But that was uniquely awful. That attempt to account for this disgusting recording that he made, when he could, of course, have been in Parliament asking the Home Secretary questions as a serving elected MP, but he elected instead to record his own little film, I think with flags in the background, on talking about the security services having this person on a watch list and reports about this and the other, and deliberately lighting blue touch paper that we've seen the consequences of. And Tom did a good interview, really good interview, which is rare with Farage. And
it's called jacking off in the States.
Is it?
Yeah, JAQ, just asking questions.
Oh, okay.
Jacking off.
Oh, that's great.
I quite like.
Is that why you have to have the flag in the background to wipe?
To clean up. I like that. So I'm just asking questions. It's so disingenuous and so ridiculous, and it didn't work because Tom read his own words back to him on a couple of occasions, which is the best way to undo Farage, which is why he gets so angry. But I found that unbelievable when he pushed him on where did this come from? Because you say reports, you make it sound so authoritative, as if you've got it off the BBC or
PA.
report. So they say where, and he said, I don't know whether he'd had a good lunch or not before. No, I mean that seriously.
I think he does every day.
Because he's normally a little bit more astute than this. To actually say the words Andrew Tate, a man currently on trial or facing trial for human trafficking, rape, organised crime, all manner of, on trial, alleged, not convicted. But even the stuff that we know about him renders him persona non grata for anybody interested in, women's rights or compassion or equality, common decency, humanity. To actually try to almost exonerate himself from culpability by saying, Andrew Tate told me it was true, and expect the response to be, oh, well, that's all right then. Poor you. Which, of course, has been a subtext of what he's been doing all week, is trying to cast himself as the real victim in the piece.
And then he said that had the police released the name and details of the suspect straight away, then none of this would have happened.
Which is a lie, because they can't. And especially as it was reported, the one bit that was reported that was true was that the suspect was 17 years old, which means an expert in British law like Nigel Farage, who never tires of telling us about the difference. Yes, of course he would.
There's no way he wouldn't know.
So the only bit that was true in what he disseminated was the bit that explained why the things he was demanding couldn't be done. So as an exercise in dishonesty, it's almost perfect. But, that's been his shtick for a long time now.
Right. We like to give calls to action to our listeners on this podcast. And today's applies to James as well.
Oh.
Because actually we asked listeners to send us questions and sort of stuff for you. And the thing that came up most is...
Why is your personality so unpleasant?
Why are you
just awful. But they said you have to start being more active on Blue Sky and moving a few follows over there. I've started, and for the podcast, we've started to act more actively migrating users over there. And I have to tell you, it's a very different animal to what it was a year ago. There are bigger numbers. There are more of the people that you will know and recognize. And the second thing that's, I think, the most important to me is that we went on there. We had a decent number of followers within hours, but they weren't a patch on the followers we have on Twitter. And yet I got much more engagement from people that I used to engage with very regularly on Twitter 2, 3, 5 years ago, who were saying to us, you have a podcast. We had no idea. They still follow me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we got this huge volume of engagement with people we used to engage with that obviously the algorithm on Twitter is just
that is quite worrying.
Basically putting up walls between us.
I worry about seeding ground. I'll have a look at Blue Sky.
You don't have to seed ground.
But you
can't parallel.
You can.
So, yes. So we will drop. They now do these things called starter packs, where you can gather a number of sort of accounts that you follow on Twitter and drop them in as a one link for people to say, I want to sign up to Blue Sky, or I want to follow all these people. And it's a really good way to sort of get cracking. So
I shall look into that.
Just have a think about it.
I will. I absolutely will.
I've got a second call to action, if that's okay. Best for Britain at shop.bestforbritain.org has some posters, and they're beautiful, and they're for your window, and it just says hate has no home here, and then in much smaller font at the bottom, immigration is best for Britain. And I think showing your neighbours, particularly if you've got neighbours who might be fearful at the moment, that they are not alone, that they don't live in a community that agrees with what is happening out on the streets, then do go and buy those. Basically, the only reason we're charging people for them is because we assume most people don't have printers anymore at home. And so it just is to cover the cost of posting those out to you. But yeah, go.
That's been a very poignant thing. So I do the website again.
We'll drop it in the...
on my show this week, people who phoning their mum to tell her not to wear a headscarf to work and tell dad to be careful on his way to mosque. One lad's football mate saying, my dad's not letting me come this weekend because he might be, he's worried I might be attacked. I spoke to a white man married to a black Caribbean woman Daniel, I think, calling me from Manchester, a Liverpudlian lad, not doing a family outing to the cinema. Just little changes to lives, which are built on precisely what you describe: a fear of the unknown, a fear of the people who you would never have looked askance at before. But you're wondering, well, would you be at that riot? Would you be there? So these posters
evil to triumph is for the good people to say nothing, do nothing. Quiet Riot. Wider woke clubbers. We've been scouring the internet to find you the best wokery-pokery out there. And boy, oh boy, has Alex found a star-spangled nugget for you.
Wokey dokey. Wokey dokey.
So as our first item looked at disinformation and conspiracies, sort of batshittery, and the second looks at US politics, I thought I would combine the two and present to you the curious case of Tulsi Gabbard. Now, if you don't know Tulsi, look her up. She's been on a journey, it's fair to say. So she was a Democrat.
From east to west,
she was
north
a
to
Democrat
south?
politician in Hawaii. And then she went for the presidential nomination for the Democrat Party the same year as Hillary Clinton. From failing at the very early stages of that, she started to really turn, started to become quite peculiar, quite right-wing, started to be a very regular Fox News contributor. Then she left the Democrat Party. She became a sort of permanent fixture on Fox News. She has her own thing now and has gone fully Trump endorsing MAGA. And look up her story. It's a very interesting one. And here she is.
President Biden has not been the guy calling the shots. He has not been the guy making the decisions, nor has it been Kamala Harris, for that matter, nor will it be if she is elected president. It is this cabal of, the Democrat elite, the woke warmongers, made up of the likes of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and, Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and, people who, those in the administrative state and the national security state who derive more authorities and ability to take away our liberty when we are in a heightened state of crisis or war.
So,
woke warmonger.
I like that.
Warmonger.
My first band
really
was called Woke
me.
Warmonger.
And also, my second question was, if basically Biden and Harris are not in charge now, but Clinton and Obama were, who was in charge? Who was making the decision when Obama was in the White House? Was that some other cabal?
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. And how about when the Clintons were in the White House? Was that an even older? Do they hand power over once you're out of power?
Fantastic, isn't it? You're no longer in power. Here's all the power. But it's a part of that thing, though, isn't it? Of telling people that they're not getting the full picture, which is exactly what Farage did in that clip on the Tuesday after the attacks in Southport. The police are keeping things from you. You're not getting the full picture. So it appeals to people. COVID, the crossover between the vaccine denial or the COVID denial, the anti-vax and this kind of politics is still don't fully understand it, but it's one of those Venn diagrams that's pretty close to being a circle.
I agree, and thank you, Alex. Listeners,
so woke warmongers
from
Wokey Dokey.
Well done,
Alex. And listeners, make sure you send us any woke finds by emailing quietriotpod@gmail.com. Quiet Riot. Sticking with the USA, we are going to discuss the latest in the presidential race. Trump has seen little, if any, benefit to choosing Vance as his running mate, with Harris stealing a march in the polls. She has now, of course, announced her running mate, former football coach, former teacher, former National Guard, current Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. On the day she made the announcement, she overtook Trump in the poll of polls, leading by a wafer-thin 0.2 of a point. Alex, you hoped that she would pick him.
Yes.
Tell us why, and is it because he was the one that coined the weird meme about Trump?
It's not just that. There's a thing about him. He has a way with words. And what I mean by that is not literary or ornate. He has a way of cutting through something and getting to the other side in a way that's really direct. And he did that again in his speech on Tuesday night. And this is something that focus groups and professional strategists have been paid millions by the Democratic Party to move on the debate from pro-choice.
Some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. These guys are after my heart chanting, mind your own damn business. That feels good, so thank you.
Listeners, you should see the grin on Alex's face right now.
No, because
genius.
It's
genius on two levels, isn't it?
Two levels. It turns the Republican stick against them, that you're not actually for personal liberty, and it makes it just completely understandable, direct, immediate. And I've never heard it before. He literally came up with it on that thing.
Yeah.
And the crowd went wild and was chanting, mind your own damn business for the rest of the rally.
And it turns the volume down on the Republican response from by remote control from miles away, because it is literally, they can only respond by saying no. We won't mind our business. We will invade your doctor's office.
And I can see like women going to those clinics with those protesters now saying, mind your own damn business.
And he's got that. You can see that. I bet he was a great teacher, because the way he talked to, I see you old white guys down there, and that would just curdle Trump's blood, won't it? Because he'll be like, hang on, the old white guys, they're my people. And of course he's reminding us that humanity is nuanced. Electorates are a lot more nuanced than perhaps many of us have remembered in recent years. And he did another couple of things. He did a thing about I'll debate J.D. Vance if he can get up off his couch. Which is obviously a reference to that myth that he had sex with a couch. And there's no earthly way that Kamala Harris would ever really reference that. But he managed to do it in a way that everyone knew exactly what he was doing, but no one could really pick him up for it. So, what was the famous thing in American politics where they made some ludicrous allegation against someone, and the candidate they said to the candidate, "You can't say that. Everybody knows it's not true." And he go, "Yeah, but now the son of a bitch is going to have to deny it." Do you remember that? I can't get it out there. Get some mad allegation out there.
Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on. That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I
did there? The Trump campaign, since Harris put herself forward for the Democratic nomination, only seem to be making any media breakthrough at all now when they say completely, even for them, mad stuff that is actually quite unpopular. How have we seen the Trump campaign react to the Tim Walz appointment so far?
Do you know, I spent Tuesday night flicking between MSNBC
and Fox,
whose faces looked like they were hurting from smiling, and Fox News, which was like an Irish wake that ran out of whiskey. and it was the most extraordinary contrast. And I mean, if the charge is that you're a little bit weird, the Trump campaign chose to roll out Stephen Miller as their proxy for this.
This man is a moron, he is an incompetent, he is a radical, and he is going to turn the entire Midwest into a third world state. This is a disaster for America. We have to beat this guy. Under the Harris-Walz plan, they're going to turn the entire Midwest into Mogadishu. That's their plan. That's their policy.
Well, this is a day after Mogadishu has had a horrific the suicide bomb on the beach.
I mean, the idea that he can respond to that joy and that energy and that enthusiasm by just getting angrier.
I worry about hope, obviously, because it's just they get dashed so often. But
last we saw each other was on the night of the election results.
I was very tense. I was very tense even after the result came through. But you do find yourself wondering, why the hell didn't they do this before? I was talking to Mateless earlier, who obviously follows American politics incredibly closely. And she was pointing out that it's the opposite of Clinton's deplorables tactic. That guy has, I think Walz has called Trump voters his neighbours. That live and let live, plus mind your own damn business, plus you're weird.
Yeah.
The 3 points of a triangle there that to me at this point looks incredibly powerful electorally.
Well, let's compare him a bit more to J.D. Vance. Obviously, he's a much more experienced political operator, but they are both pitched as being able to bring over the Rust Belt for their presidential running mate. Walz, I think, is able to deliver the Trump and Vance a weird messaging from a real place of authenticity. So he's from a town of 400 people. He said, and we've got no private schools there. And he claims that the way J.D. Vance tries to weaponize the resentment of the rural Appalachian white vote is completely inauthentic. And that those voters really hate politicians using them in that way. Do you agree? Or because of his record on being very pro-LGBT stuff before it was even popular across the rest of the Democrat movement, and, you know, enshrining abortion rights and
but we're back to live and let live, aren't we, though? I think it might turn out to be kryptonite for Trump and Vance. This okay, you might not think that's great, but I live and let live. I'm not going to tell you who you can have sex with, so why should you be able to tell that person over there who they can have sex with? So I think it is... The word you've used that's most pertinent here is authentic. This is just who he is. He's not,
and that's very difficult to battle, isn't it?
It really is. It's just who he is, and it's the opposite of what we've seen. I think a lot of, not so much Biden, but certainly I think Hillary Clinton, you could see them straining sometimes to be what they thought people wanted to see. This guy doesn't seem, and nor does Harris, actually, a little bit more than he does, but he does seem to just be the real deal. I love the footage of him with his daughter.
In the slingshot.
At a theme park. And
the animals.
But he also, he said something that was actually quite obnoxious. He said something that, coming out of a different mouth in a different context, I would be not offended by, but I'd be perturbed by when his daughter said, "I'm a vegetarian." And he said, "Oh, we'll have turkey then." Yeah. And she said, "But that's meat as well." And he said, "Not in Minnesota," or something like that. But it's a way he's doing it that doesn't feel like he's attacking vegetarians and vegans. It just seems like a nice bloke. When they're together, it's a room you'd quite like to be in. Because you think you'd come out of it happier than you went in. And I don't think anyone is ever... Even their biggest fans are going to say that about Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
And I think what I worried about was that she's going to have to go for an older white man. And the energy that she has brought back to the Democrat campaign since Biden said he wasn't restanding has been incredible. And it caught off guard not only the Trump camp, but a lot of Democrats. They weren't expecting it. And so I was like, Is an older white man just going to dim some of that light?
The youngins love him.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
They love him. The slightly more serious point, sorry to bring it down a tiny bit, but, you know, when you're picking a vice president, you're picking someone who will be your stand-in if anything happens to you.
Yeah.
And so I think there is politically something there in Harris choosing someone vastly experienced, with a service record of 20-odd years, a public servant, a teacher, a football coach, all of those things, and Trump choosing a completely inexperienced mini-me.
Weirdo.
Who
you would be spooked by the prospect of being in the White House.
And so,
you could be spooked by the prospect of
And so that is the serious
Even a Trump fan could be spooked by the prospect of J.D. Vance being in the White House. No one will be spooked,
and Trump
as
is
you're
78
saying.
years old. Yeah. So, he's choosing
oldest candidate ever, I think.
Now,
must hate that.
We do try to give everybody a call to action.
Yes.
And it's much trickier, we find, when it's something about US politics. But, Alex, you've got something.
Finally, I've got one. C-SPAN. You can actually donate to C-SPAN.
What is C-SPAN
from
for those
whatever
who don't
country?
know?
So C-SPAN is the American equivalent of our Parliament TV, Parley app, and the public service radio and TV station. They do completely, genuinely impartial stuff. They transmit contents of committee inquiries and stuff like that live and direct, like our Parliament TV does. And they do really great little podcast explainers on constitutional points. So they're a little bit also like the Institute for Government. Mm-hmm. It's all of that stuff put together, and they perform a great public service in the States.
And
so they're a great organisation to support if you want to.
And we can pop a link in the show notes
and we will.
for how to do that. Great, thank you.
Brilliant.
Quiet Riot.
And now, after that essay on weird, it's time for our last regular feature where we pay fond homage to those who like to tell us they really, really don't like us, frequently, bracingly, fruitily. And since I know he has a stash of these, I asked our guest to pick one of his favourites.
So
You've got to troll with it, James.
I can't really. I did pick a favourite. There's so much. Even when I'd looked briefly when I knew you were going to ask me this question. The first one I came across said, "You are Britain's #1 wank stain," which I thought that was quite nice. But I'm blessed with some trolls who are dedicated to a degree that really makes you fear for their sanity or their family or whatever it may be. And some of the best things they do, I've already mentioned people who now doctor clips of me saying things I've never said. But the people who doctor covers of my books are probably my favourite.
Like fan fiction kind of thing.
Yeah. So they come from both ends of the political horseshoe. Uh-huh. So I wrote a book called How to Be Right, and the number of people who think that it is an act of comedic genius, often with quite clumsy, to change the word right to wrong, and maybe how to be a wanker.
But you've also
but so the more effort they put into it, I find conversely, the more pathetic they ultimately
have you ever
to
seen
be.
One of them and thought, actually, that's not a bad idea for the next thing?
That would be great, wouldn't it? How to be a twat. But there is a cottage industry in that field, which is always that weird ones who try to be really nasty.
Do they call in at all?
Not anymore, sadly. very. They used to call in all the time. It's kind of why people know who I am.
Call to action.
That post-2016 thing, when I just spent my life saying, could you just name one law that you're looking forward to no longer having to obey?
Yes, I guess after a while they knew how that one was going to go.
And also they know I'm going to ask them if they say my rights are being eroded, my identity's being stolen, I want my country back. I'm going to say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
That's all, very politely. It's actually disrespectful not to ask people for the workings behind what they're saying. So 30p Lee does it all the time. I want my country back. What do you think that means to the people setting fire to hotels?
Well, that is it for this week's show. In the can. And a huge thank you to James for joining us today.
Thank you. I've had a lovely time.
Well, do come back very, very soon.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're a social media type, we have a different ask this week, the X-Twitter bonfire. So we're building up our following on Blue Sky instead. So please come and find us there.
And don't forget to like, subscribe and review. Every little helps. Thank you so much for listening. And we will see you again very soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou, and me, Kenny Campbell. Except I'm not Kenny Campbell, so I'm going to have to do that again. Quiet Riot is an audio...